Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Best Choice Realty's class tonight, where we're going to be talking about non-NWMLS purchase and sale contracts. So for those of you who want to kind of just get some ideas on ways to handle certain situations, this might be the class for you. A lot of our top producers will consider all the property types, not just a residential purchase and sale agreement. They'll stretch themselves and actually have a more knowledge or experience in knowing what to say when they're working with their clients, with their buyers specifically. So tonight I'm going to cover give you a taste, like the taste of non-MLS contracts. And then if you have further knowledge that you still need to receive, we'll go ahead and do some other classes or breakouts to give you the training that you need for some of these things. So class is not supposed to teach you everything in 30 minutes, but it certainly will get you on the right track. So let's go ahead and jump right in, Shannon, if we could. The first one we're going to talk about is the new construction. Now, there is a lot of new construction going up right now. And I heard for the very first time that D.R. Horton actually is there. They have like a waiting list, and new construction is very popular. And so, don't be shocked to find that you might be in a multiple offer situation, even with a builder. We are hearing about some of those sites that are very popular. With the builder contracts, what you want to keep in mind is that you will normally see some sort of offer sheet, which is what I have here on the right. The offer sheet will basically have your client's information, the brokerage information, your email information. But before you even get to this point where you're actually wanting to write an offer, don't forget when you're dealing with new construction, you need to register your clients. Registration is super important, because if you don't register, then the builder oftentimes will hire a site agent who will in essence take a portion of your commission. And there's nothing I can do to help you with that. Sometimes I've been able to, with D.R. Horton specifically, I can talk about the relationship that we have with D.R. Horton, and then refer to maybe a buyer agency agreement that you have orchestrated with your client. But unfortunately, if you have not registered, you run the risk that you might not be getting paid a full commission. And that goes for every builder in Washington. I would make sure that you register them. Even if you think, oh, this is not a very big builder, you might want to find out if they have a registration policy. So a lot of times you'll want to, if you're at the point where they're like, yes, we want this one, Carrie maybe is out working with a buyer and he's interested in looking at new construction, and she knows that the client maybe is going to buy something new, you might want to register not only on D.R. Horton, but if you know Richmond American or Mainview is also building in those areas, you may want to also register them in those communities as well. And that would protect your commission so that you're not going to have problems down the road. So then once you get registration, again, there's no cost to register. Then you get to the point where you form a relationship with that builder, and that builder will often have what they call their purchase form. It is not a purchase and sale agreement. They will actually be the ones to put the purchase and sale agreement for you together. So it's quite simple to sell a new home, because they do all of that for you. But you do negotiate on this purchase form that you see here on the right. Every builder has a different type of form. This just happens to be D.R. Horton's form. So you'd enter their top information, your contact information at the top, and then the sale details is basically the community, what the name of the community would be, the address, the plan. If there's a buyer bonus with DHI, that is their preferred lender. Most of the big builders have their own preferred lenders because they've had problems with getting loans to go through or loans falling through. They will often have a preferred lender that they'll refer to, and they'll often give you closing costs or upgrades by using that preferred lender. It is completely legitimate. They can do that because they are a builder. They're not a licensed real estate broker, and they often will do that and encourage the buyers to use DHI or use that preferred lender. You don't have to. So a buyer, sometimes I've saved my clients a lot of money by not using the preferred lender because they have a relationship with maybe my lender and we compare. Doesn't mean that we have to use the buyer's lender, but oftentimes they offer a bonus. So if they decide to go with a different lender that's not DHI or not the builder's preferred, then you may have to, there may be some more, you won't get the bonus or the buyer bonus oftentimes with that situation. So that would be something you would want to indicate on their sale details. The earnest money, you know, they will usually have a minimum that they would like to see. That's a great question to ask that site agent, is what's the minimum earnest money that you'd want to put down on something like this? They're used to hearing that a lot, and they'll give you some instruction. Most builders I'm seeing are requesting at least 1% of earnest money. But again, you might want to talk with your particular builder. If you're working with a veteran or if you're working with a unique situation, they might be willing to accept less on the earnest money as part of the packaging of the offer. If it's a competitive situation, it's going to be the same as it is in regular purchase and sales. On the other or miscellaneous, this is they purposely only give you guys 2 lines to write in because they don't want you asking for the world. New construction, the builders make more money if they can get this lined up without having several line items, like they want wood floors or they want to have black as their accent color. Any of those types of requests, they want a minimal amount of requests that they're having to deal with. Typical requests that we see on these types of situations would be like washer and dryer or refrigerator negotiated. Now realize with new construction, there's not a lot of movement in price, but there may be some negotiation room either with buyer bonus or closing costs or washer, dryer, refrigerator. Most likely not everything. If you happen to get everything, give yourself a pat on the back because that does not happen very often. In fact, most likely we're not seeing anything from new construction coming in with those types of items. We'll either see the refrigerator thrown in or maybe some sort of buyer bonus, but not both. You will need to indicate with new construction whether it's going to be the primary residence and investment, because that's how the construction loans, when they start construction on some of these plats, they get financing for often. And so then there's restrictions with who that end user could be. And there is limitations for primary residence, secondary residence, or investment properties. And also they have a section where it's called home sale contingency. This is another advantage of going with a new home. Oftentimes builders will allow that buyer to sell their home, especially if the home is in a lower price point and they're move up buyers, meaning that the end user would be somebody, their second home, or they've owned a home for many years and now they're selling that one and they've outgrown it, or it's not big enough or not new enough for them. And so builders often will allow for the home sale contingency. If you're in a multiple offer situation, maybe not, but for the most part, builders have been very good to me and to our best choice realty brokers when we've had homes to sell. If there is a home sale contingency, you check the box yes, and then they will incorporate that into the contract when they actually put it in front of your client. You'll need to put the mortgage company's name, their address, the loan officer. Even though you send them a pre-approval letter, make it easy on them because they're the ones, the site agent or the builder will be actually putting this into a contract. The buyer will initial, and then you will send it on into the listing agent and the listing office as you typically do when you represent them on a regular purchase and sale. The only thing I would suggest though is if they change their mind, if they need more earnest money, or if they didn't like your other miscellaneous, they could come back to you and counter you or send you an email, and that would need to be obviously agreed upon. We treat the purchase form with D.R. Horton, for example, very much like if you got a counter offer, you might counter offer a couple times to get the sale details correct. Just make sure when you counter, you always have your buyer initial next to that change to make that official. Okay, so we talked about the offer sheet. Make sure on Form 17 that if you're working not with D.R. Horton, Richmond American, or any of these other builders, that you also look to make sure that the Form 17 section, specifically Section 7, is referenced in your purchase contract. Jerry Kay and I do a pretty good job of finding those builders and holding them accountable to that section, but if you could just make sure that If you are working with a smaller or mid-sized builder, that you make sure that Form 17 is addressed somewhere in their contract. We talked about closing costs or proration or upgrades. We talked about the preferred lender escrow. A lot of these builders will have preferred escrow companies as well, and they save money. That's the reason they want to use an escrow company of their choice, because they've got builder rates. Many times the builders have negotiated, and so they're able to save money on title and escrow because it is a new construction. So if you're working with a builder, or you're realizing your buyer's like, well, I want to use my person at Chicago or my person at First American, sometimes you can ask for that particular closer, but most of the time they're already open title and they already have a potential person handling the escrow. There's not a lot of negotiation that you guys can have when it comes to the preferred escrow company or the preferred title company. Earnest money, be careful on earnest money. It does get sent to the builder, sometimes on the small or mid-sized builders. But if your client is going to, say, put a new garage, or they want something, they want upgraded carpet, oftentimes the builder will require either the earnest money to be non-refundable, or to have an additional non-refundable deposit for those particular upgrades. And those upgrades, if your buyer decides, I changed their mind, I failed on financing, or I failed on, maybe on something else, they changed their mind on the build, they're not only going to lose their earnest money if they just change their mind, but they also would lose their non-refundable upgrade deposit as well. So be very careful when you're having your buyers sign contracts that are related to earnest money non-refundable or non-refundable deposits for upgrades that they may consider doing. When people ask me on new construction, Rochelle, do you advise that your client do an inspection? I always advise that my client do an inspection, even on new construction, because I have seen so many builders. D.R. Horton is not exempt. I'm putting them up on the screen, but D.R. Horton actually, depending on what site or what area of the build or when they build, there could be some difficulty in what their subs did. And we don't want to have issues where the buyer says they did something wrong, and we have a structural inspector that can go in and find these things out before they close escrow and hold them accountable to that before. The builders will often tell you that they should, they're going to do an inspection and make sure that it passes the city inspection and the building inspection. And they try to get you guys as buyer's agents not to have your buyers do structural inspections, and just go with the 1-year home warranty, that they'll come back within that 1-year home warranty and do some of the corrections that are structurally, or that, the nail pops or those types of things. The problem I have with that is, number one, is the builder going to be around in 6 months or a year? The other thing would be, how likely are they to come back, and what's their customer service like after they close escrow? I would often think it's much better practice to find a good structural inspector that has been very familiar, maybe a builder themselves in the past, to actually do their inspection for them before they close escrow. And there are provisions in D.R. Horton's contract for that, and all of the builders that are in our area will usually have some provisions to allow the buyer to do the inspection. They just may not be able to terminate using the inspection clause. That's not the way these builders' contracts are written. They usually allow for a walkthrough, and then that walkthrough is usually 5 days before closing, and that structural inspector would go out to the property at that point in time and identify maybe some of the things that need to be addressed. And then we would need to either extend the contract or work with the superintendent or the site or the builder specifically himself to make those corrections so that they pass inspection. If you want to go to bestchoicerealtyhomes.com /builders, you're going to see links to all of the builders in our area and their websites. That maybe will help you in knowing if you want to learn their processes. That's the best way I know to, instead of going to the site, obviously belly to belly and having that conversation with the builder would be best. But if you are trying to get kind of an idea of where are they building, what flats do they have currently, do they do custom, do they not, what are the upgrades, what are the commonly asked questions, you may want to go directly to their websites to learn more about that particular builder. So you're welcome to send that. I just made it kind of a quick reference so that you guys or your clients could go to bestchoicerealtyhomes.com/builders and actually check out some of the builders in our area. Okay, next slide. Fannie Mae and Homepath. So there's been a lot of talk, with everything going on with Corona, like, are we seeing a surge in Fannie Mae or bank-owned properties? The answer to your question, or if you're wondering, is no, not in our area. We currently are not seeing an increase right now with Fannie Mae or Homepath or foreclosures for that matter, but we don't know what the next 6 months or 12 months will look like. So I think it's helpful for you to see how Fannie Mae and Homepath is done, just to be prepared for those types of occurrences. Shannon, our operations manager, she actually purchased a Homepath. In fact, her very first home was a Homepath out in Spanaway. She said it was okay for me to share her purchase price. Prices have gone up significantly since she bought this home back in 2016. But you can see how it was done. So you can see on the right-hand side, you will need to type up it's kind of like a hybrid, right? Where you're using the Form 21 for Fannie Mae, but then they have their own addenda that you can see in line 16. You want to take a snapshot of that or write that down. That's how I negotiate the Homepath. It's pursuant to Section 28 of the Real Estate Purchase Addendum. It's subject to all their terms and conditions set forth in the purchase and sale addendum that they have at Homepath. And you'll not use a 22D, you cannot use a 35, no 22K. You'll notice on line number 12, we have to waive on Fannie Mae the payment of utilities. That has to be waived. They will not agree with it if you do it the other way. I did somehow get number 13 to be prepaid in full by seller. I don't know how that happened. Usually they want that assumed by buyer as well, but that was not something that changed. And also in escrow, just like new construction, the title and the escrow, the seller is going to direct. So you may want to ask the listing agent who the seller is using, depending on what the escrow company. I just put seller's choice because I didn't have the time to talk to the seller. It is usually whoever they use on file. So you might want to check in with that before you write it up. You do have some additional forms, and Shannon will go ahead, and if she wants to flip the screen real quick, we'll kind of show you what Homepath. You want to register, you can sign up. It's not going to hurt you to sign up for an account with homepath.com. And that's just homepath.com, and then you would have access to all of the properties. There's a buyer's agent section. You've got to click on real estate professionals and then click buyer's agent section. And then it kind of walks you through making an offer is very simple. So like when Shannon, I wrote it on a Form 21, and then I went ahead and grabbed the purchase and sale addenda and the homeowner occupant certification, as well as the utility inspection form. All of those are available on their website. You can easily download them. It looks like they have changed since 2016, but not very much. It still has a party. You do have to type this all in. It's a pain to do this on transaction desk. I would recommend probably typing this all in separately from transaction desk and then uploading it as a supplement and then dragging and dropping all of the initials to this paperwork. It's a long addendum. So Form 21 would be there, and then you would attach this one, and again, you would do it at the part of signing. I would type everything up before submitting. Go back up, Shannon. So there's a couple things. People always ask me, do I have the right to terminate? Can I do an inspection? The answer is yes. I have 10 days to make sure that this property will work for my buyer. And that means I could hire an inspector, I could hire the lead-based paint guy, I could hire an asbestos tester, I could hire whoever I would like to go out to do that inspection during that 10-day period of time. So we would go mutual if they accepted our offer. And then I would have 10 days to do for my purchaser, my buyer, to go through and make sure it is intended for their use. It's no different than doing a feasibility, no different than doing a structural, or maybe a lead testing. Anything like that needs to be done within the 10 calendar days. And it's 10 calendar days. Make sure it's not computation of time. This would take priority over the regular Form 21. So it is 10 calendar days from the effective date. So we get the paperwork back where the seller would initial, and then you have 10 days to complete your inspections. and this is a Fannie Mae form. Other questions is how to fill out the financing. Go back up 1/2 step. There you go. The closing shall take place on or before the expiration date. That actually is the closing date, which is different than some states. They call it the settlement date. In our state, we call it the closing date. So Fannie Mae is a federal, obviously a federal foreclosure. So they kind of use language that may not be similar to what we use here in Washington. So this again would take priority. If your buyer's like, Rochelle, can you help me understand what this means in comparison to, say, the Washington state contract? Our answer should be, we cannot advise on the Fannie Mae addendum. We can only fill it out. They would need to have their attorney or somebody that they know interpret this contract. We cannot interpret documents that are foreign to us, which this would be considered a foreign document. Even though we have to fill it out, we can talk about the purchase and sale agreement at the Form 22A. We just cannot interpret the settlement date and the closing terms and things that are of this nature to the buyer. So again, I don't want to get into the whole reading it, have them read it. If they have questions, you know, we can certainly talk about the contract that we have and the differences, but we certainly cannot interpret what this means to them. If they have questions about how to fill, like, what does this term mean? You can't advise them on that. I'm trying to find one that, go back down. Let's see if we can find one. Keep going. There's a section here. It's inspections. Obviously, we have 10 days. Repairs, condition. The purchaser understands the seller has acquired the property at a foreclosure, deed in lieu, consideration, all of these things. If the buyer says, Rochelle, what does this mean? I cannot interpret this for them because this is not a contract that I have been licensed to interpret. Even though it's a federal form, even though it's Fannie Mae, it doesn't matter. We cannot interpret this for them. It's as is, and basically what that means is that they should hire an attorney or they should get somebody to advise them on what to do and whether this property meets their needs. Go back up to financing real quick. I think I missed something there. So you do have to fill in, is it cash? Is it contingent? This on the purchaser, you cannot write a Fannie Mae if you're contingent on the sale of a property. So if you are contingent, say you have a home to sell, you have to have your property under contract and closed before you can offer on a Fannie Mae home. They do not allow for home sale contingencies. So that eliminates that from the mix if you have a buyer who has to sell a home. They'll have to close and then they'll have to pay cash or they'll have to get financing for it. They will not accept a home sale contingency. You'll fill in the amount of the loan amount. This is the information you're like, well, what do I fill in on this? For all financing, the purchaser shall apply for a loan in the amount of, that's the loan amount. That is the number you should be getting from your lender with the term of, is it a 15-year? Is it a 30-year? I've never seen them make a determination between a 15-year or a 30-year, but that you need to fill in based on what the lender is telling you. And then they have to have commitment by, and then they put in the amount. When can you get commitment? So you have 5 calendar days to basically get commitment, and that would be the date that you write in there. So again, be very careful. Financing it overrides. There is no 22A. This is the financing contingency that you have here in the purchase and sale. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Actually, let's pull up the MLS number 1559613. So you can see an example of what that looks like. So let me just type that on in here. 1559613. Because a lot of you are like, you get to this point and then you get stuck with me. Hang on. No, that's not the one we're going to go to. We're going to go to. Okay, there we go. All right, this property in Oak Harbor is an example of an actual Homepath property. So you would see this property in Oak Harbor. In the agent remarks, this is where you're going to go, oh, geez, it's a Homepath property. You showing time for the appointment, you still conduct your business as normal. It's just in the agent remarks, you might have some seller must comply with HUD guidelines. 24 CFR 206, they're required to put that into their listing. Property is sold as is, meaning that the buyer cannot request the seller to do work orders, and you have to submit your offers through Homepath. So you would need a login and password for homepath.com. Doesn't hurt you tonight if you want to go in and create a login and password. I have one. I haven't submitted a Homepath in a long time, but there are the supplements, and I believe the supplements are the paperwork, but let's just double check and see. So if you looked at here, there they are. So if you did not go to homepath.com and find it, they provided, the listing agent has provided all of the Fannie Mae addenda, the offer guidelines, the owner occupant form, and the utility inspections form, especially the legal and the lead-based paint disclosure. All of that is in the supplements. Not always do we see that with listing agents. Sometimes they do a really poor job. So be on the lookout for those. Homepath is kind of the key phrase when you're looking at this type of property. Realize you're needing a Form 21, the addenda that is either here or on the Homepath website, and then once you're going to submit it, you could email it to Marilyn Buck, right, on this one, but actually you need to follow the instructions. You could email it to her just to make sure she got it, but you have to go through homepath.com and upload it into their system in order for it to be properly received and reviewed. So just don't forget that step with Homepath. Inspections, they're as is, but you do have the right to terminate. Let's go to the next slide. HUD homes. Told you get a little sprinkling tonight, and then I think we're going to be out of time on the vacant land, and we'll have to take that up next week. But HUD homes, we are licensed at Best Choice Realty. Not all the firms have that licensing to be able to place bids on the HUDhomestore.com. I know we're probably talking about this probably 6 or 12 months ahead of time, but HUDhomestore.com, I think there's only 8 or 9 properties that are in Washington listed on HUDhomestore.com. So there's not very many on the HUD Home Store right now, but you can place a bid. You are eligible. If you need the NAID, that's what you're going to need to log in to HUDhomestore.com. You will need your license number, your pertinent information to create an account with HUDhomestore.com. And then you'll need the NAID, N-A-I-D number, which is up in the upper right-hand corner there. The BSTCH, Shannon forgot the C, it's BSTCHC 3978. That is the correct NAID. So we'll update that before we post it on our YouTube, but you'll need the BSTCHC. And then what you'll do, once you have a login, you'll log into their website just like this. So go ahead and log in, Shannon. We'll search for a property here. So you can see there's not very much on the market right now, but who knows, maybe there is. Here's the 6 properties in Washington. Literally, you guys, this is it. And let's just pick one in Black Diamond. That's a new one that came up. And let's say we want to place a bid. You have to be a bidder. You have to be a HUD registered bidder. If it's a first-time buyer, they have to find a broker that is a HUD registered bidder. So some of you who are thinking like a marketing, you're thinking, oh, dang, I work for a company, Best Choice Realty, that actually provides this opportunity and is registered to be a HUD registered bidder. Kind of get your mind thinking, yes, you can promote these listings. Yes, you can let people know that you're a registered bidder on HUD. You can let your clients know about these properties. They do not have any rules around that. So you click on submit an offer, and then you're going to see a screen here. You do not use a purchase and sale agreement. In fact, you don't even put a Form 21 together on this property. You go in, if your client is interested in it, they have 1 day. So if Shannon was my client, I have 1 day, 3 hours and 59 minutes to submit a bid or submit an offer. They call it a bid with HUD Homes, and you have to use the NAID. So there you go. So you click on the NAID, and you are a selling broker. You put in your NAID, which is BSTCHC 3978. And then you put in your license number, 18762. I gotta remember my number, there we go. And I'm not a robot, and verify your NAID. Once they verify your NAID, then you'll see that it puts together the case number. Back in the day, this used to be we had to hand do everything. Everything is electronic now with HUD. So they've come around since back in the 90s when I used to write these deals. The price would be, and I could offer less. Most of the HUD homes are going for above asking though right now. So let's just make it like real. Let's just say I wanted to offer $375 and ask for $5,000 in closing costs, netting the seller or netting HUD after commission a certain amount. Seller will pay reasonable customary costs, but not to exceed. So I'm going to ask for the $5,000 in closing costs right there. And I forgot to put in there, I do have to apply for what type. Is my client paying cash or financing? They made it easier, so this property will not go FHA. It's only going to go conventional. So I have to be a conventional financing. And they have changed that. That used to be very challenging to understand what they were talking about with the way that they were structuring their financing. They don't care at HUD whether you're getting an FHA, VA, conventional, whatever the financing may be, or cash. They treat all of the offers the same. So even if you're paying cash, you think, oh, I'll have a better shot at this. All HUD cares about when you're placing the bid is how much they're going to net. So this net amount right here is what they're looking for. Now I can play with the numbers. Let's say I want to give my client a deal, and maybe I only want to charge the client to kind of get in the bid. Maybe my net to the HUD will be better. You could like say I only want to get paid $8,000 or Best Choice Realty. See how my net amount is higher than the price right there that they've listed? So that in essence, other people may not know that trick. You actually can modify the amount of commission that you're going to earn by just making that change right here. Now, again, be reasonable, don't go crazy. You want to get paid for doing this because this is a lot of work and it does require a license and all of the work that I have to do every year to renew. So, you know, it's worth quite a bit of money here because they have to use somebody to place the bid. And so that is something you can negotiate right here. If you're playing on the, you know, there's gonna be a lot of offers on it. Then you put is it an investor? Is it a nonprofit owner occupant? It's an investor. It's owner occupant. It has to be for this period of time because it's a first look. So it automatically says I will owner occupy this property. If I'm an investor, I'm gonna have to wait and see if this property comes back up as an investor property. And I always select may hold as a backup offer. Are there any people that are in the immediate family? I select no. And the selling broker submitting this bid has ownership in the property? No. And then I end up putting, I have to have the buyer's social security, EIN, or identification number, and I have to confirm that. So I don't need to pick up earnest money at this point, but if I do win the bid, if that was the winning offer, then I do have to collect that earnest money very quickly. So you need to make sure that your client is prepared to do a cashier's check or a money order for the earnest money, because that's all tied to their social security number and to their name and their address. All of this has to be filled in order for me to submit the bid. That bid gets reviewed, and then at the end of the period, see it says bid submission, then they would open the bids and they would email and notify me as well as you if you were the winning bid. They would then take the DocuSign and they would send everything for your buyer to sign electronically, as well as me to sign electronically as well. So that's how HUD homes are done, but it is a different process. It does not require any paperwork except for a buyer agency agreement that you have to have in Washington State. Our buyer agency agreement would be fine. You would have to include that in the package as well, or you could use the 42. So either the 42 or the buyer agency agreement. Again, it shows that we have a buyer agency agreement with our buyer. And the inspection is as is. And again, we're going to be asking for Form 17 to be waived by the buyer. So we'll be asking you for that if you were the winning bid. So that's an example of what a HUD home looks like. The last slide, I think, was the bankruptcy. I'll quickly go through bankruptcies and then we'll wrap it up, and then I'll save land for next week's session. But if we go to the MLS number 1, if we have one that we can show you, bankruptcies have carve-out fees. They're not for every buyer. Sometimes you can get a really good deal in a bankruptcy. You just need to know how to talk about it. Most of the time they'll accept cash out for sure, or conventional financing, but they have to be responsible for the carve-out fee. And you cannot ask for closing costs. So those types of fees that the buyer will have to have that money set aside. So a lot of times when I'm working with a buyer who is like, I'm an investor or a new investor, I want to look for bankruptcies or short sales or foreclosures, I let them know that a lot of those fees they need to be prepared to pay for. because this is how the agent remarks looks on a bankruptcy sale. It says by appointment, subject to the bankruptcy court and lien holder approval, 5.5% BK fee included in the listing price. So that's what's nice about this one, is they put it in the listing price. So they are in essence paying for it. That they started doing that recently. But what that means for you is that you can't be asking for closing costs. That's not how these sales are done. You have to use the attached forms that they put on the supplements, and then allow for 90 days on the 22SS. So this is not for like, oh, hurry, let's close this one quick. Short sales or bankruptcy short sales do take time, but you know what? This is a great deal in Snoqualmie. Once they get to 550, and once they got to the sweet spot, and they do this a lot with the Fannie Mae as well, they'll maybe start higher and then they'll drop the price and drop the price and drop the price until they get to the sweet spot. And then all of a sudden we still can negotiate, or we can put an offer or bid in. It needs cosmetic updates. I saw the picture, saw this one, and it looks to be good. But again, we would actually have to use the escrow company, not the escrow company, the law office. Many of the bankruptcies are done by law offices. Wanda Nuxel does a lot of these short sale bankruptcies. And there are other foreclosures or bankruptcy sales that I see coming through various law offices. And law offices can handle escrows. The other thing to keep in mind with bankruptcy short sales or bankruptcy sales in general is that it requires most of the time a legal proceeding, which means that takes some time and it's contingent, or it could never happen. You have to go to the courthouse and actually see how that process works. But that bankruptcy has to happen, and the person living in the home or that owns the home that's going through the bankruptcy, they are not required from filling out the Form 17. So you will not have a Form 17 with these sales. You do have to pay for your buyer has to pay for the carve-out fee, that 5.5% bankruptcy fee. Watch those supplements. Make sure you look at that. Indicate you can't counter, you can't change their mind on who's going to actually close it. It has to be that law firm. And there is going to be some sort of instructions. If you need help with your first one, we do actually quite a few bankruptcy sales in our office due to the relationships that we have with some of these law firms and these companies. So we know the RE/MAX brokerage very well. We do quite a few of those. But again, if it's your first time going through it, let's have a chat, let's call on the phone, let's make sure that you know what you're doing. But those are just some of the quick tips I can give you when you're handling a bankruptcy. And then again, there's the offer summary. So again, a lot of these instructions would be a supplement where you would know straight up you would not have a Form 17. Legal description still has to be attached. The copy of the earnest money check, oftentimes they will ask that. Make sure if you're using a copy of your earnest money check, don't just send it with the account number. I'm very concerned and sensitive to wire fraud or taking your account or your banking, your routing information. So make sure you black out that information before you send the copy of the check to this particular listing agent. And then a pre-approval letter is quite normal. They'll want to know that you're using a conventional, on this one, a conventional loan, and it's been pre-approved, and they want it to have the same name as the pre-approval letter. So make sure when you write your offer that you use the same name that's on the pre-approval letter. And that will avoid a lot of challenges that you're going to have. Okay, that's a wrap for tonight. Hopefully this was helpful for many of you. If you have any specific questions, hopefully you took a few tips tonight. You can send me an email. I'm short on time tonight, so if you can send me an email, I would be happy to answer your questions specifically. And like I said, we'll talk about vacant land and how that works and how to write vacant land next week. So I'll table that since I had a lot to talk about tonight. But have a great week, you guys, and we'll talk to you soon. Send me an email if you have pertinent questions, though, about this topic tonight.